Good morning. Today's scripture lesson is from 2 Corinthians, chapter 8, verses 10 through 15, and chapter 9, verses 6 through 10. If you'd like to follow along, it's on page 941 and 942 of your Pew Bible. And in this matter, I am giving my advice. It is appropriate for you who began last year not only to do something, but even to desire to do something. Now finish doing it so that your eagerness may be matched by completing it according to your means. For if the eagerness is there, the gift is acceptable, according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. I do not mean that there should be relief for others and pressure on you, but it is a question of a fair balance between your present abundance and their need, so that their abundance may be for your need, in order that there may be a fair balance. As it is written, the one who had much did not have too much, and the one who had little did not have too little. The point is this: the one who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and the one who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each of you must give as you have made up your mind, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to provide you with every blessing in abundance, so that by always having enough of everything, you may share abundantly in every good work. As it is written, He scatters abroad, He gives to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Come on.
Yeah, I might be riding to help him preach, but I'll let you do. I don't know what it's like for you, but for me, as I turned 60, and even before that, I have something I need to do as soon as I get out of bed in the morning. Now, this is after, of course, the water closet, but the first thing I have to do in the morning is stretch, right? So it's like I grope out of bed towards the bathroom, kind of hunched over, and by the end of my stretching exercises can actually stand straight up, and it feels good. Otherwise, I would feel hunched all day. And so it was just a couple weeks ago or so, I texted this picture to Chris's partner, Tyler, about where my muscle pain was, and he gave me this stretching exercise that I've added to my regimen in the morning, and just like that, no pain. So here's my conclusion, that life and aging or maturing actually contracts our muscles, and stretching, of course, expands them. And so I wonder if God stretches us, or if there's such a thing as spiritual stretching exercises. Maybe you have some you do yourself. And to sort of give away the point, this is one of 2 Sundays a year that North Branch talks about money. What we all know is that when you're asked for money, your spirit, kind of like those muscles, tightens, right? And because we're asked for money all day long. You drive by billboards that ask you for money. You get on Facebook and there's ads that are popping up. You get robocalls all throughout the day asking for money in some way or another. And it just contracts you and me sometimes. And so Paul kind of knew when he started writing this request to the Corinthians for money for the poor Christians in Jerusalem, the mother church, that it's almost like he senses that they might be tensing up a little bit. So he writes, "So we have urged Titus, who encouraged your giving in the first place, to return to you and encourage you to finish this ministry of giving," he says to the Corinthians. And he can tell they're probably going like this. So maybe Paul would like my favorite fundraising quote that I've shared once or twice with you before in the last 20 years, but I'm going to assume you forgot it. It's by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, author of The Power of Positive Thinking. And if you ever listen to Dr. Peale talk, he had a very grovelly voice, and he said, I saw in his last financial campaign, I saw a video of what he said, and he said this: "When I die, I'll go to one of two places. And if I have to raise money, it'll be the wrong place." That's how I feel too. The wrong place. And so Paul tries to take a little of the pressure off as he writes further to them. He says, whatever you give is acceptable. If you give it eagerly and give it according to what you have, not to what you don't have. You must each decide in your heart how much to give, and don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure. So what Paul is saying is, look, you can't give what you don't have. Give what you can give, and just give proportionally. And it's as if God was saying to them what God is saying to us, and that is just relax a little bit. Just relax a little bit. As a matter of fact, Paul had a fundraising goal, but it wasn't what you think. You know, if you've been to our, a lot of organizations have these thermometers, and we've had thermometers before, and you want to raise this. Paul's fundraising goal wasn't so much an amount, but it was an attitude that he was after. And this is what he wrote. He says, "For God loves a person who gives cheerfully." Wow, that's an attitude. Now I think that God has wired each of us, each human being on the planet, to want to be generous. And I believe that God has wired each of us to want to give cheerfully. Now, it's hard because we're constantly bombarded, and so we have to kind of protect ourselves and maybe again contract a little bit. But I think at our best and at our normal, we want to think of ourselves, and we want to be even generous. So that kids find shelter at the Sunrise House, or seniors find affordable shelter at Kirkside, or at Hope House there's affordable counseling that we make available, or whatever. We want at some level to give. And some churches and some religious institutions will tell you what to give. But what North Branch tries to do is to tell you how to give, cheerfully. So if being asked for money contracts us a little bit, then generosity stretches us, right? Stretches us so the muscle pain goes away, and we can be more functional and healthy and living in a better way. And that's sort of the example that Paul gives here in this fundraising letter for the poor mother church in Jerusalem. And he's referring here to the Macedonians who, actually for you it's there, referring to the Macedonians who were another poor congregation who had gone above and beyond what was expected of them. And he says they're being tested in Macedonia by many troubles, and they are very poor. but they are also filled with abundant joy, which has overflowed in rich generosity, he says. In a sense, what Paul is doing here is saying, 90% of the economy in the ancient world were peasants and they lived from hand to mouth. So he's saying these Macedonians who live from hand to mouth have shown you an example. You, rich Corinthians, who gave your name to the pillars that we see in front of banks. We call them Corinthian pillars, right? And so he says, since you excel in so many ways in your faith, you gifted speakers, your knowledge, your enthusiasm, and your love from us, I want you to excel also in this gracious act of giving. I've got a Corinthian column there someplace, don't I? We lost our Corinthian column. Okay, that's all right. No problem. But you see. So what we know is, as we compare ourselves to the rest of the world, that if you and I have money in the bank, or if you and I have some sort of a pension plan, or a 403B or 401k, we are richer than the vast majority of people who've ever lived in this planet. So maybe we can't give cheerfully. Now, having said that, that sounds like guilt, right? Kind of sort of the opposite of where Paul started. So Paul goes on, and Paul says, I'm challenging you by the example of Macedonians, but I want you to realize that giving is good for you. And that's all right, Jason, we're glad you're here. And this is how he says it. For God is the one who provides seed for the farmer and then bread to eat. In the same way, he will provide and increase your resources and then produce a great harvest of generosity in you. Now that's interesting, because I don't know if you read these things or not, but since I have to do what Dr. Peel and I both hate to do, that is fundraising, I read these studies, right? And there's a number of studies out there. You can Google them and read them yourself. But how generosity is actually good for us. One recent study was done by the University of Zurich, and what they did is they gave 100 people $50. And they asked half of those people to, I think it was 50 people $100. Excuse me, let me flip that. For 50 people $100. They asked half of that group to spend $100 on themselves, and they asked the other half of the group to spend it on others. And then at the end of the activity, they rated their happiness. And of course, you know who was happy. The people who spent it on who were expected to spend it on somebody else. Right? They were significantly happier because I guess that just connected with that cheerful giving, that generosity wiring that we have inside of us. And I've experienced this myself, and I'm sure you have too. As I've grown in generosity over my life, and we've been blessed to be able to commit to tithe, to give 10% of our income, mostly to the church. I find that I didn't start stretching to give more because I felt cheerful. I stretched to give more first, and then I felt cheerful. And then I felt good about feeding the hungry, or walking for global, local hunger causes, or welcoming little Hindu children into the preschool to sit around and hear stories about Jesus, or all of the different missions that we do here. That I felt good about that because I had stretched first in trying to do it. As a matter of fact, and you can Google this yourself, but if you follow the research tells you that stretching in generosity not only makes you happier, what it does is it is equally effective to lowering blood pressure as medication or exercise. So all North Branch is trying to do is lower your blood pressure. Right? I can't even say that straight. So let's close with this. Why stretch in generosity in your commitment to 2020? If you're a member of this church or a regular visitor this week, you'll be getting a letter asking if you'd be willing to make a commitment. next Sunday or soon after. If you're not going to be here, you can mail it in, or the next Sunday you're here. Make a commitment to be generous in 2020. Well, why do we do it? Not only because it's good for us, but because we live on mission. And that's what Ray and Herb taught us, to live on mission. If you know that they were members of the church for 50 years, both passed away in the same year, 2016. Herb was always trying to get us to acquire the next property, the next property, the next property, the next property. And Ray was always trying to get us to stretch to meet a social need in each of those properties. I'll never forget, it might have been 10 years ago or so, but I had just hit up Ray for another generous commitment to whatever capital campaign du jour was happening back then. And a Sunday or two following, he shows up to church with a friend. And he introduces me to the friend this way. Hey Todd, this is, I'll just say Joe, that wasn't the name. Hey Todd, this is Joe. He's loaded. So I got to know Joe. I tried to lower his blood pressure. But without those two men, we would not be doing affordable housing at Kirkside, or having more space to welcome Hindu children, which a significant population is South Asian in our preschool, or the Sunrise House for 2 homeless families, or the Hope House, which includes some affordable counseling, or our newest, the Haven House, is now housing its second refugee family. We wouldn't do much of any of that if it wasn't for their inspiration to live on mission. And so I think the least that you and I can do, blessed as we are, is to stretch to feel better, to stretch because we want to live better. And maybe when you get your letter this week, you'll say, I don't commit to, I'll give what I give when I give. Well, I would invite you to think about making a commitment next year if you haven't before. Or if you have made a commitment before, to stretch to live up to it. Or if you've been a generous lead giver as these people were, then I invite you to give as you've been blessed, even if it's able to be beyond what you committed. Because here's what we know. You'll be healthier. And the church will be able to make a greater difference, because that's what Ray and Herb taught us, and Paul before that, and Jesus before that. Let's pray. Help us, Lord, to stretch. Stretch for our own good. To stretch to be able to reach out to others. To stretch to be able to live up to those who have gone on before, who've given us their example. Help us to stretch. And in our stretching, to feel your blessing. And to feel the cheer and the happiness that stretching gives us. In your name we pray. And all God's people say, Amen.